The black and white checkered floor stretched beneath Sofia Morales like a chessboard where only the losing pieces mattered, and she was losing. The vinyl booth creaked under her weight, the torn seat hissing as she shifted, her worn sneakers sticking to the grease-slicked surface, the smell of burnt bacon grease and stale coffee hanging thick in the muggy air before the storm. 3:22 in the morning. The diner was nearly empty. A man in a trucker hat dozed 2 booths down, his coffee long gone cold. The neon sign outside buzzed like a dying insect, casting everything in sickly pink. Sofia's jacket lay crumpled beside her, borrowed, smelling like other people's desperation and old cigarette smoke. She kept her hand in the right pocket, fingers wrapped around the bills there. $78. She counted them again because counting them made them feel real. Counted them because she had nowhere else to move her hands. The thunder outside was getting closer. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. A half sandwich stolen from a table before the manager saw her. She hadn't slept in 36 hours. Sleep meant dreams. Dreams meant remembering her mother's face the day the foreclosure notice arrived, meant seeing those hands on her skin again, meant all the things she had spent 8 months trying to forget in a shelter where nobody asked questions because everybody there was running from something. The bell above the diner door chimed. Sofia didn't look up. Just another customer. Just another person who wasn't her. The thunder outside sounded like something breaking. Then came a sound that made her spine go rigid. A child screaming. Not the casual crying of a tired toddler. The raw, shattered scream of a small body in profound fear. Getting louder. Coming closer. Sofia's head snapped up. The door burst inward and a girl stumbled through it like something thrown, rain streaming down her face mixed with blood from a split lip, her yellow sundress soaked and torn at the shoulder, her small thin arm marked with purple fingerprints. Fresh grip marks. Deep ones. The kind that came from an adult holding down a child who was trying to escape. The girl's eyes were wild, scanning the diner, searching, until they landed on Sofia and the child's body went slack with relief. Vivi, the girl sobbed. Emma. 7 years old. Sofia had watched her every day at the Mercy Street shelter for 8 months, had braided her hair, had let her sleep in her arms because Emma's nightmares were worse than hers. Vivi, he hurt me. He hurt me and I ran and I remembered you said always run to safe places and you're the only safe place I know. Sofia didn't think. She moved. Her legs carried her out of the booth, her arms reaching, pulling the child behind the counter in one fluid motion, shielding her small body with her own. The girl pressed against her back, trembling like a bird with a broken wing. Sofia's hands shook as she looked at the child's arm. Those marks. Purple blooming into black at the edges. Fingerprints shaped like violence. She knew those marks because she wore them too. Scars running across her shoulder blades like a map of hell. 8 years of scars. Invisible now under her borrowed jacket but still there, still aching when the cold came, still screaming in the silence of sleepless nights. The hand that had made them belong to a man who no longer existed in her life, he had simply stopped existing the night she climbed out a window with nothing but the clothes on her body. It's okay, Sofia whispered, though her voice was breaking. You're okay. You're safe now. The bell above the door chimed again. Not a soft chime. A violent one, as though the door had been pushed open with force, with intent. Rain rushed in sideways. The smell of wet asphalt and expensive cologne filled the space. 3 men entered from the summer thunderstorm. The first man wore a black suit soaked dark with rain, water dripping from his shoulders onto the checkered floor. He was tall, 6'3", with a build that suggested violence was not theoretical, but practiced. His hair was dark and precise, not a strand out of place despite the storm. His face was sharp angles and controlled power, but it was his eyes that made the air in the diner stop moving. Storm gray. Cold. The kind of eyes that had seen things they should not see and decided they didn't care anymore. A scar ran from the corner of his right eye to his cheekbone, thin and white and devastating. He wore a Patek Philippe on his wrist worth more than Sofia would earn in 5 years. Gold rings on both hands, simple and solid. The two men flanking him were built like the doors to a fortress. The one on his left, Tony, had a neck thick as a tree trunk and hands that looked like they had been broken and reset 1,000 times. The one on his right, Pietro, had his suit jacket open, and the shape of a gun was visible beneath his arm. The tall man's eye swept across the diner. Across the trucker hat man, who suddenly decided to be very interested in his cold coffee. Across the kitchen. Across the register. Then those eyes landed on Emma. Everything changed. The tall man's body went absolutely still. His jaw clenched so hard the muscle in his cheek twitched. His hands curled into fists at his sides. When his voice came out, it was quiet, so quiet that Sofia had to lean forward to hear it, but that quietness was more dangerous than any shout could ever be. "That is my daughter." 3 words. Soft as a prayer. Heavy as a death sentence. Sofia's heart stopped. The child behind her stiffened. The trucker hat man stood up slowly and left his cash on the table and walked toward the back door with his head down. He understood. Everybody understood. This was the kind of moment that destroyed people who were in the wrong place. Sofia was in the wrong place. She was holding the wrong child. She was facing the wrong man. "I didn't," Sofia started, but her voice came out barely a whisper, shattered like glass. "I don't." The tall man took one step forward. Just one. His shoes left wet prints on the checkered floor. "My daughter was taken 3 days ago," he said, and his voice was like venom, like a blade wrapped in ice. "From the school parking lot at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. From my wife's car while my wife was in the bathroom for 2 minutes. 2 minutes. And now she stands before me with that look in her eyes, and I will find who did this, and I will." He stopped. His gaze had shifted from the child to Sofia, to the way Sofia's arms were wrapped around Emma, to the protective curve of Sofia's body shielding the girl from view. To the worn fabric of Sofia's borrowed jacket. To her bare wrists. To her trembling hands. His storm-gray eyes narrowed. "What happened to you," he said slowly, "is not what happened to her. Those scars on her arm. Those are fresh. 2, maybe 3 hours." He looked at his lieutenants. "I received the kidnapping call at 1:30. That means whoever took her has had her for 1 hour and 52 minutes. And my daughter came here. To me," Sofia whispered. "She came to me." "Why?" The word snapped like a whip. "Because I'm the only person in her world who protected her," Sofia said, and she meant it with every shattered piece of her heart. "I'm the only person who ever taught her what it meant to be safe." The tall man stared at her. Really stared at her. As though he was seeing her for the first time, not as a piece of furniture, not as an obstacle, but as something actual and real and significant. In that moment, Sofia Morales did not know that she was standing in front of Aleandro Calabrese, the most dangerous man in Los Angeles, a man who had built an empire on violence and silence and the kind of power that made federal judges recuse themselves from trials. She did not know that Tony and Pietro had not seen him speak with that particular kind of gentleness in 15 years. She did not know that her name was about to become synonymous with power. And she did not know, none of them knew, that the man who had taken Emma, the man named Douglas Hale, had been hunting Sofia for 8 months through every homeless shelter and soup kitchen and street corner in Los Angeles, tracking her like a predator tracking wounded prey. That he held her name and her face and her debt over his head like a weapon. An $85,000 debt. 3 days to pay. Or die. What changed everything was the sound of sirens in the distance, growing closer, and Aleandro Calabrese looking at the small child in Sofia's arms, then looking back at Sofia herself, and making a decision that would reshape both their lives in ways neither of them could yet understand. The thunder outside continued its approach, the storm moving closer to Los Angeles with each passing second. 8 months earlier, the summer heat of Los Angeles pressed down like a hand trying to crush something alive. Sofia Morales sat in her car, a 2003 Honda Civic with a check engine light that had been glowing orange for 6 months, in the Walmart parking lot on Sunset Boulevard, everything she owned arranged on the passenger seat like artifacts from a life that no longer existed. 2 shirts. 1 pair of jeans. A toothbrush with bristles worn flat. A crumpled foreclosure notice dated March 15, the paper soft and destroyed from being folded and unfolded 1,000 times. She was 31 years old but looked 47. Her dark hair, which her mother had once called the color of chestnuts in candlelight, hung limp and unwashed past her shoulders. Her eyes were the color of wet concrete, empty in a way that made other people uncomfortable. They looked away from her now. They always looked away. The foreclosure notice was addressed to Maria Morales, her mother, but it might as well have been addressed to Sofia. The house was gone. The house where she had hidden under the kitchen table from ages 9 to 17, where her stepfather's footsteps meant pain, where her mother had finally found the courage to leave him but not the courage to leave the debt he created. $47,000 in predatory loans. Then the house was sold to pay it, and when there wasn't enough money, the remainder became Sofia's burden to carry. But Maria was in Seattle now, living with her sister, trying to build something small and new. Sofia had made sure of that. She had said, "Do not come back. Do not call. Do not try to help me. Just live. Just be safe." Sofia opened the car door. The heat that fell out was the kind that made breathing painful. She grabbed her backpack from the back seat, slung it across her shoulders, it weighed almost nothing because she owned almost nothing, and walked toward the gas station next to the parking lot. The bathroom was a study in fluorescent humiliation. The lights buzzed like insects dying. The mirror above the sink was spotted with brown stains Sofia did not want to identify. She filled the chipped sink with cold water, pulled off her long-sleeved shirt even though it was 94 degrees outside, and began to wash. The scars on her back caught the light like roots on a map of hell itself. 8 years of hidden abuse leave marks. They run in every direction, some thin like paper cuts, some thick and raised like rope burns, some that branch out in patterns that look almost deliberate, as though someone had written a story of pain across her skin and never bothered to learn how to read it. She had worn long sleeves for 14 years, even when the temperature climbed above 100 degrees. Even when people asked why. Even when she was sweating so hard she could barely stand. She never told anyone. Not her mother. Not the shelter counselor who had tried, gently, to ask. Not the 2 friends she had before she became invisible. She kept it covered the way other people keep secrets, which is to say, imperfectly, completely, forever. Sofia scrubbed her armpits with paper towels and a bar of soap she had stolen from a motel. The water ran brown for a moment, then clear. She pulled the shirt back on, even in the heat, and went back to her car. 3 weeks later, she was sitting on a cot in the Mercy Street shelter, and a small girl with dark curls and a mouth that never opened was sitting beside her. The shelter was a converted warehouse on Olympic Boulevard, which meant it was loud and cold and smelled like industrial cleaner trying to hide mold. The kitchen served dinner at 5 o'clock every evening, a rotation of spaghetti, chili, chicken that had been boiled until it forgot what meat was supposed to taste like. Tonight it was chicken and rice. The small girl took her spoon and pushed the rice around her plate without eating. "You have to eat," Sofia said. Her voice, when she used it, came out hoarse. She hadn't spoken to anyone except the shelter staff in 3 days. The girl did not respond. She was maybe 6 or 7, thin in a way that suggested her body had learned to need very little. Her eyes were dark and watchful, and they moved constantly, tracking every person in the shelter, every door, every sound. "My name is Sofia," Sofia said. She was not good at this. She had no practice. But something in the way the girl kept her hands folded on the table, something in the tenseness of her shoulders, recognized something in Sofia that matched it. "You don't have to talk." "That's okay." The girl looked at her for 3 seconds, a long time for a child who did not trust. Then she pushed her plate towards Sofia and turned her attention to the applesauce cup. Sofia looked at the cold chicken. She looked at the girl. She pushed the plate back. You eat the chicken. I'll eat the applesauce. The girl's mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile, but something close. She picked up the chicken and began to eat. In the mornings, Sofia braided the girl's hair in the shelter bathroom. The curls were thick and tangled, and Sofia learned the girl's name through context and overhearing staff conversations. Emma, age 7, admitted 3 months ago with paperwork that had more redactions than words, staying in the corner of the shelter where nobody asked questions. Sofia's fingers worked through the tangles. She had not braided anyone's hair since she was 19, since her mother let her practice on a rainy afternoon before everything got broken. Emma sat very still on the toilet seat, very quiet, while Sofia's hands moved through her curls like she was translating something beautiful back into existence. I used to have a sister, Sofia said quietly. She did not have a sister. She did not know why she said it. And I taught her how to braid. She said I was very bad at it. She said my braids looked like dead snakes. Emma's lips twitched. Not a smile, but evidence of something trying to smile, trapped inside. At night, when the shelter lights went dim and the sounds of 40 people sleeping in one warehouse moved into that strange territory between silence and noise, Emma would crawl from her cot to Sofia's and whisper things that broke Sofia's heart into smaller and smaller pieces. I'm scared of the dark, Emma said one night. My mother said nighttime was when the bad things came out. She said they came out from the walls and the floor and they took little girls and she stopped. Her small body trembled against Sofia's side. Sofia did not tell her that she had lived in the dark for 14 years, that the dark held no new fears for her. She said, close your eyes. I'm right here. I will not sleep until you do. She kept that promise every night. 43 nights, she kept it. And then, on a night when the temperature had dropped and the warehouse felt almost cool, Emma whispered something new. There's a man who comes to look at the children. Through the fence. He smiles, but his smile is wrong. It doesn't go all the way to his eyes. Sofia went very still. He comes when the staff are in the kitchen eating dinner. He stands by the fence and he looks at the girls, and one time he looked at me and he smiled, and I felt like, Emma struggled for the word. Like I was food. Sofia's fingers found the scars on her own back, even though she could not see them in the dark. She knew exactly what Emma meant. She had felt like food before. She had spent 8 years being consumed by hands that were not supposed to touch her, consumed by a man whose eyes had that same quality, that same absence of human light. If that man ever comes near you, Sofia said, and her voice was different now, something sharp and dangerous underneath, like a blade wrapped in cloth, you come and get me. You understand? You find me and you get me, and I will make sure he never looks at you again. Emma nodded against her shoulder. Promise? I promise, Sofia said. I promise with everything I am. She meant it. She meant it the way saints mean prayers, the way the drowning mean goodbye. She meant it in a language that transcended words, in a commitment written in blood and bone, and the kind of love that only grows between two people who understand what it means to be hunted. 21 days later, Emma was gone. The staff told Sofia at breakfast time. Matter of fact, the way they reported everything, detached, bureaucratic, as though they were reading a weather report and not describing the disappearance of a 7-year-old girl. A man came yesterday afternoon. He had paperwork. He said he was a social services volunteer. He said he had an educational program. He asked to take Emma for 4 hours. By the time we checked the paperwork, they were gone. 4 hours. Then 8. Then the police were called. A description was circulated. Black car, no visible plates. Male, age 45 to 55, medium build, driving behavior erratic. Sofia was sitting in the shelter library, a room with 15 books and one computer that connected to the internet 3 days a week, when she saw the man's face in her memory with absolute clarity. He had come to the shelter 3 weeks earlier. He was wearing a polo shirt with a logo for a non-profit organization. He was carrying a clipboard. He had a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and when he walked past the children's wing, Sofia had felt her stomach turn in a way that was almost physical, a sensation that lived below conscious thought but screamed in a language that predated language. She had never seen him before in her life, but she recognized him the way a deer recognizes the scent of a predator. His name was Douglas Hale. She learned this by asking the shelter staff to show her the paperwork. The organization was real. His credentials were legitimate. His face in the photograph was the same face she had seen, the same smile, the same dead light in the eyes. But the worst thing, the thing that made Sofia's hands shake until she could barely hold them still, was the letter that arrived for her 3 days later, at the shelter, addressed in handwriting that was almost childlike in its care. The envelope contained 2 things, a photograph and a note. The photograph showed her mother's house. The house where Sofia had hidden under the kitchen table. The house where she had been broken. The house that was supposed to be gone, sold off, erased. The note was written in pen, the letters large and precise. I own your mother's debt. I own her foreclosure notice. I own the paperwork that says your mother owes $47,000, and I own the extension that says you owe it now. You have 3 months to pay $85,000, or I will find your mother in Seattle, and we will have a very different kind of conversation. I suggest you find the money. I suggest you work very hard. I suggest you think about your mother every moment of every day, because I will be thinking about her. The signature was just the letter D. Sofia kept the letter in her pocket. She withdrew the $40 she had saved over 3 months of shelter wages, minimum payment for maintenance work, $5 an hour if you worked 7 days a week, and the month began its countdown. 3 months became 2 months. 2 months became 1 month. 1 month became 2 weeks. And then, on a night when the diner off Sunset Boulevard was nearly empty, when the thunder outside sounded like something ancient being dragged across the sky, a small child soaked and bleeding stumbled through a door, and Sofia recognized the dark curls, the small frame, the terror in Emma's eyes. The man who walked in behind her was tall and broad-shouldered, and when his eyes landed on Emma, the entire world changed its axis. The summer thunderstorm crashed against the windows of the diner like something alive, desperate to break through. Lightning fractured the sky into 100 pieces, and the rain fell so hard it erased the street beyond the glass. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed above cracked vinyl booths that had held 1,000 stories of desperation. The clock on the wall read 3:22 in the morning. Sofia stood behind the counter, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge. Emma's small frame was pressed against her waist, the child's dark curls still dripping wet, her thin arms locked around Sofia like she might disappear if she let go. Both of them were soaked. Both of them were terrified. The diner door swung open. The man who walked through seemed to command the air itself. He was 6'2", broad-shouldered, his expensive charcoal suit clinging to him from the rain. His dark hair was slicked back, revealing a sharp jawline and eyes the color of a winter storm, gray and penetrating and filled with a fury that made the light above him seem to flicker. A thin scar ran from the corner of his left eye to his cheekbone, pale against his olive skin. His name was Aleandro Calabrese, and he owned more of Los Angeles than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. Behind him came 2 men. Tony, broad and scarred, his hand already moving toward the weapon beneath his jacket. Pietro, tall and lean, his eyes scanning the diner with the precision of someone calculating exits and threats. Both of them moved with the practiced silence of men who knew exactly how many steps it took to reach a gun. Frank, the diner owner, 73 years old, balding, exhausted, froze at the register. Aleandro's eyes moved past the men, past Frank, and landed on Emma. And the entire world changed its axis. His face transformed. The fury didn't disappear. It deepened. It became something that looked like death itself taking human form. "That is my daughter," he said, his voice low and solid like an oath. "That is my Emma." Sofia's grip on Emma tightened. She stepped forward, placing her body between the child and the men. She had been afraid of many things in her 27 years. Hunger. Cold. Pain. But she had learned something in the 8 months she had been protecting Emma at the shelter. Fear and courage were not opposites. Courage was simply fear that refused to retreat. "She stays at the shelter where I sleep," Sofia said, her voice steady though her hand shook. "I have been protecting her for 8 months. Aleandro stepped closer. His eyes never left Emma's face. "From what?" Sofia lifted Emma's left arm, gently, carefully. Beneath the soaking wet sleeve of her pink shirt were bruises, dark and fresh, shaped exactly like fingers. Grip marks. The kind that came from being held too hard by someone who did not care if they caused pain. The same kind Sofia wore on her own body beneath her borrowed jacket. "From the man who took her," Sofia whispered. "From the man who owns my debt. His name is Douglas Hale." Tony and Pietro exchanged a glance. The kind of look that men exchange when they realize the world is about to reorganize itself. Aleandro's hand moved to his chest, and for a moment it seemed like he might stop breathing. "You know where he is." Sofia shook her head. "But I know what he wants. He wants me dead in 3 days if I do not pay him $85,000. I have 78. That is all. That is everything I have been able to save in 8 months of $5 an hour wages and people's leftover food." She did not tell him about the foreclosure notice. Not yet. Some wounds were too fresh to open. Aleandro stared at her. This woman in a borrowed jacket that smelled like other people's desperation. This woman with calloused hands and tired eyes and a scar barely visible at her collarbone where she had tried to hide under a sink and the man had found her anyway. This nobody who had stood between his daughter and danger without knowing his name, without knowing what he could do to her, without knowing anything except that a child needed saving. He made a decision in that moment. The kind of decision that would reshape both of their lives. "You are coming with me," he said. Sofia's entire body went rigid. "I do not go anywhere with men I do not know." Aleandro's lips moved into something that was not quite a smile but close enough to change the atmosphere. "You just put yourself between my daughter and danger. You know me better than most people ever will." Emma reached out, her small hand finding Sofia's. "Sofia, please. I am scared." Sofia felt the weight of that small hand. She felt the way Emma's fingers dug into her palm like Sofia was the only solid thing in a world that had become liquid and dangerous and wrong. She felt the decision being made for her by something deeper than logic. She nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, Emma. We will go." Aleandro turned to Tony and Pietro without another word. "Bring the car. The penthouse. Full security. Nobody follows us, or they disappear." The men moved with the precision of those who had heard similar orders 1,000 times before. They did not ask questions. Questions belong to people with choices. These men had made their choices long ago. The drive through the storm took 34 minutes. Sofia counted them. 34 minutes through rain that seemed to grow heavier with every passing second, through streets that looked like rivers, through a city that was disappearing behind water and darkness. Emma fell asleep against her shoulder somewhere between the 7th and 8th minutes, her small face peaceful in a way it had never been while she was conscious. The penthouse was on the 43rd floor of a building that cost more than entire neighborhoods. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Los Angeles spread below them like a circuit board of light. The furniture was modern and expensive and cold, leather and steel and glass, everything sharp angles and perfect lines. It was the opposite of comfort. It was a place where a man stored himself when he had nowhere else to go. Aleandro carried Emma to a bedroom. His hands, which Sofia knew from the way Tony and Pietro watched him were capable of terrible things, held the child with an impossible gentleness. He laid her on a bed that was surely more expensive than any place Sofia had ever slept, and he pulled a cashmere blanket over her body, a blanket worth more than 4 months of her wages. When he came back, he found Sofia standing at the window, watching the rain fall on the city below. "You should eat," he said. Sofia turned. In the penthouse light, she could see him more clearly. The way his jaw worked. The way his hands had clenched into fists when he saw those bruises. The way his eyes held something broken beneath all the power. "I am not hungry," she said. "You have not eaten today. Or yesterday. Or the day before." It was not a question. He could see it in the way her clothes hung, in the way her collarbones were visible even beneath the borrowed jacket. "Tony will bring you something." She did not argue. What was the point of arguing with a man who owned entire buildings? Tony brought her a spread of food, fruit, bread, coffee, a small bowl of pasta. He set it on the table with the care of someone who had learned, somehow, in his years of being dangerous, that care was still a language some people understood. "In 15 years, he said quietly, so quietly that only she could hear, "I have never seen him bring a woman here. Especially not one who looks like she has been sleeping in her car." Sofia did not answer. She was too focused on not crying in front of these men. When Tony left, Aleandro sat across from her at the glass table. He did not eat. He did not speak. He simply watched her with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she had not felt since her mother had held her 14 years ago, before the stepfather, before the breaking. "Tell me about the scars," he said finally. Sofia's hands froze around a piece of bread. "What scars?" "The ones you are hiding under that jacket. The ones that make you flinch when anyone moves too fast. The ones that are probably running across your back in every direction like a map of somewhere very dark." She could have lied. She was good at lying. Lying had kept her alive. But she was too tired. The exhaustion of 8 years of hiding, of protecting herself, of being afraid, it crashed down like the storm outside. 8 years, she whispered. "My stepfather. He started when I was 11 and did not stop until I was 19 and I finally ran. I left everything. My mother. The house. My ability to believe that anyone would help me. The scars on my back are the only thing I took with me when I left." Aleandro's jaw tightened. She watched the muscle work beneath his skin. When he spoke, his voice was different. Deeper. More broken. "My brother Luca betrayed our family 5 years ago," he said. "Sold out our operations to our enemies for money and a promise of protection that never came. I had to choose between mercy and survival. I chose survival." He paused. Outside, the lightning cracked again, illuminating his face. "My brother died that night. I carry that choice like a scar on my soul." Sofia understood then. This man had not grown powerful despite his darkness. He had grown powerful because of it. Because he understood what it meant to have been broken and to have put himself back together anyway. "Then you know what it means to belong to no one," she said. "Yes," he answered. "And you know what it means to save someone even when it costs you everything." The rain continued to fall. Somewhere in the darkness beyond the windows, the city breathed, and lived, and broke, and healed. Sofia thought about Emma sleeping in the expensive bed. She thought about the foreclosure notice still in her pocket, the paper so creased from her carrying it that it was nearly falling apart. She thought about how quickly everything could change. How in a single night, in the span of 7 minutes beneath a summer storm, her entire trajectory could shift from running to standing still. Neither of them knew, as they sat in that quiet moment, that 3 blocks away, Douglas Hale was watching the diner through binoculars from a darkened office. Neither of them knew that Rachel Dawson was already sending messages to her PR team, already planning how to dismantle Sofia's credibility before Sofia even realized she had become a threat. Neither of them knew that the FBI had been watching them all. What they did know, in that moment, was that something had changed. Something fundamental. Something that could not be undone. At 11:47 in the evening, Sofia Morales stood outside a warehouse on the east side of Los Angeles, rain beginning again, cold water soaking through the borrowed jacket that no longer felt like protection but like chains made of cloth. Her hands shook. Not from fear, she had moved past fear somewhere between the diner and this moment, but from the weight of what was about to happen. The $78 in her pocket felt like the only real thing she still owned. Everything else had already been taken. Inside that concrete building, 3 blocks from the traffic lights of Vernon Avenue, Douglas Hale was counting money. Stacks of bills fanned across a metal desk, the proceeds of 8 ruined women, of loan schemes that had crushed her mother, of a violence so methodical it had become invisible to everyone but those who lived inside it. At 11:52, his phone would ring. Sofia's voice would come through, steady now, steady in a way that would terrify him more than any threat could. But first, she had to believe she could do this. The rain fell harder. Summer storms do not announce themselves gently in Los Angeles, they arrive like judgment, cold and sudden, erasing the heat that had baked the city for months. Sofia's scars ached beneath her shirt, 8 years of them mapped across her back like a geography of survival. She could feel each one. The weight of them pulled at her shoulders. She thought about Emma sleeping in an expensive bed in a penthouse in downtown Los Angeles, safe because Aleandro Calabrese had decided, in a moment that still seemed impossible, that she mattered. She thought about her mother. The foreclosure notice in her pocket, creased from months of carrying it, felt like a blade pressed against her ribs. $22,000. That was the sum that had destroyed everything. A loan from Douglas Hale, predatory and coiled, promising to save her mother's small restaurant, instead drowning her in a debt that had no bottom. Her mother had tried to fight it. Her mother had tried to be strong. And then one morning, she simply stopped trying. The letter came on a Tuesday. The bank took the restaurant on a Friday. Her mother took her own life on the Saturday after that. No one had called it a murder. That was the cruelty of it. Sofia's phone buzzed at 11:54. A text from an unknown number, warehouse. Midnight. Come alone or the girl dies. She could have run. The night was dark enough to swallow her. She could have disappeared into the streets of Los Angeles, caught a Greyhound bus heading east, become someone new in a place where her name meant nothing and her past was just a weight she could finally set down. She could have let Aleandro handle it. He had the power, the resources, the men who would move like shadows through darkness and emerge with blood on their hands and no questions asked. But then she heard it. Not in the physical world, but in the part of her mind where Emma's voice lived now, small and trembling. You stood up to the bad man. One thing. One moment where she had refused to let a child disappear into the machinery of cruelty. That one moment was now asking everything of her. Sofia pulled out her phone and dialed the number stored simply as they. Aleandro answered before the second ring. Where are you? His voice was sharp, controlled, the voice of a man accustomed to moving pieces across a board. The warehouse. East Side. He sent the message. Silence on the line. She could feel his mind working, calculating, determining whether to forbid her, protect her, or trust the steel she had shown him in the diner. Stay on the line, he said. Do not hang up. Do not move forward until I tell you. She did not argue. She stayed on that line, listening to the sound of him moving through his world, doors opening, commands spoken low and measured, engine starting. She heard Tony's voice in the background, how many? Aleandro's response, as many as it takes. 12 black SUVs arrived at the warehouse at exactly 11:59. They came without sirens, without announcement, moving through the Los Angeles night like predators that had learned long ago that patience was more effective than noise. Men in dark suits, 12 of them, stepped out and moved into position around the building. Then came the second wave, FBI tactical units, their jackets marked in white letters, their weapons visible, their professionalism absolute. Agent Rachel Williams, the lead investigator, had been tracking Douglas Hale for 14 months. She had 8 women's testimony, 2 years of financial records, and a tip that had come from an anonymous source inside Aleandro Calabrese's organization, a lieutenant named Marco who had decided that some lines should not be crossed, that protecting children was a code that existed above codes of silence. Sofia watched the warehouse door, watched the night fracture with light and motion and purpose. At midnight exactly, she stepped forward. Aleandro moved to her side. His hand found hers, not holding it, not claiming it, just confirming that she was not walking into darkness alone. His men formed a perimeter behind them. The FBI maintained their distance, understanding in the way that federal agents sometimes do that there are hierarchies of power that have nothing to do with law. "You came," Sofia said. "I told you," Aleandro said. "You are not alone anymore." The warehouse door stood 15 feet away. Sofia could hear movement inside, could hear Douglas Hale screaming orders at his men, could hear the panic in his voice as he realized that something had gone catastrophically wrong. The first agent through the door moved with precision honed by 100 operations. Flashlights cut through darkness like surgical instruments. The shout came, "Federal agents, on the ground, now," the words that transformed a space from private to public, from hidden to exposed. Douglas Hale was in his office counting money when the door crashed open. He lunged for the pistol in his desk drawer, but Tony was faster. Tony had been waiting for permission to hurt someone for 3 days, and Douglas Hale's death wish was the permission he had been praying for. The gun went flying. Douglas went to his knees. He was begging before his knees hit the concrete. "I can pay you," he gasped. "I have 4 million in accounts in the Cayman Islands. I can give you names. I can give you everyone. Rachel Dawson started this, she's the one who." Agent Williams stepped over him. "Douglas Hale, you are under arrest for human trafficking, loan fraud, kidnapping, money laundering, and racketeering. You have the right to remain silent." The words continued, the Miranda rights spoken like a benediction, and Douglas Hale, who had destroyed 8 women, who had crushed Sofia's mother under the weight of impossible debt, who had tried to take Emma into darkness, began to cry. His face dissolved. His carefully constructed predator's smile vanished. What remained was a 53-year-old man trembling like a cornered animal, and even that was too generous a description because animals do not choose cruelty, do not cultivate it, do not wake each morning and decide to hurt. Cameras waited outside. News crews had arrived within minutes of the FBI's arrival. Within hours, the image of Douglas Hale in handcuffs would be broadcast on every local station. By morning, it would be national. By the end of the week, it would not matter what he had done or to whom, only that he had been caught, that his face was known, that his name would carry the weight of what he was forever. Meanwhile, 3 miles away in Brentwood, Rachel Dawson was receiving her own version of midnight justice. The FBI arrived at her mansion at 1:33 in the morning. She came to the door in a silk robe the color of champagne, her hair still perfect, her facade still intact, until the agent showed her the warrant and everything began to crack. "Rachel Dawson, you are under arrest for financing a human trafficking network and conspiracy to commit fraud and loan sharking." Her mansion, which had taken her 20 years to build, was dismantled in hours. Her computers confiscated. Her files seized. Her bank accounts frozen. Every piece of evidence of her philanthropic image, the charity galas, the board memberships, the photographs of her with the mayor and the city council, became exhibits in a federal prosecution. "You cannot do this," she said, her voice still trying to command authority. "I know people. I am on the board of 3 foundations." "I have?" "The mayor signed the warrant," Agent Williams said, her voice carrying no judgment, no triumph, only the simple fact of justice moving forward. By dawn, Rachel Dawson's face was on the news. By noon, every organization she served had distanced itself from her. By evening, the evidence of her role in Douglas Hale's network was public, and the cruelty she had exercised through money and influence and social standing was exposed to the same light that had burned through the warehouse. The charges came down like rain: 35 years for Rachel Dawson, 40 years for Douglas Hale. No possibility of parole. No redemption waiting at the end of a decade or two. The systematic destruction of their freedom, their futures, their names. Death would have been too quick, too easy, too merciful. 8 women emerged from that warehouse into the Los Angeles dawn. 8 women who had been told they were nobody, that they belonged to the men who held them, that escape was impossible. 8 women who discovered, in the space of one night, that someone had been watching, someone had been working, someone had been building a case that would save them. Sofia's testimony was the cornerstone. The voice that could not be discredited, could not be dismissed, because she had lived it, because her scars were the map of truth, because she had been willing to stand in the rain outside a warehouse at midnight and say, no more. The storm passed before dawn broke. 3 weeks later, the morning sun climbed over Los Angeles like a promise kept, and Sofia Morales sat in a penthouse that still did not feel like hers, watching the city wake up below. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed her a skyline she had never belonged to, a view worth more than every dollar she had ever earned. The glass was so clean it seemed invisible, and beyond it, the Pacific caught the light like scattered diamonds. She held a piece of paper in both hands. Not a foreclosure notice this time. A deed. Her mother's house. The house that had been taken, the house that had been lost to Douglas Hale's loan schemes 8 years ago, now returned with a signature from Aleandro Calabrese written in black ink that looked like a promise. You are awake early, Aleandro said behind her, his voice deep and solid like an oath. He moved without sound, a skill forged in 15 years of power, and now he stood beside her instead of threatening her, and somehow that was harder to understand. Sofia's hands trembled. I could not sleep. The nightmares. No, she said. For the first time in 8 years, there were no nightmares. That is what kept me awake. Aleandro took the deed from her hands, his fingers brushing hers, and read it as if he had not already signed it himself. His dark eyes, the color of midnight before a storm, moved across the paper with the care of someone reading scripture. The scar running from his temple to his cheekbone caught the early light, a permanent map of a violence he had survived long before he learned to cause it. Your mother is moving in this week, he said. I sent movers yesterday. Her apartment in Van Nuys is being cleared. She asked me to tell you she loves you and that she does not understand how you survived, but she is grateful every day that you did. Sofia turned away from the window. Why are you doing this? All of this? You could have let me go when the FBI took Douglas. You could have given me the money and sent me away and forgotten about me. I could have, Aleandro said. His voice did not change, but something moved in his chest, behind his ribs, a thing that had no name because he had never felt it before. But when I was 17 years old, my sister disappeared. 3 days of silence while my father's empire burned with the need to find her. 3 days while I learned that power means nothing when the person you love is gone. 3 days that taught me that mercy is not weakness, and that saving someone is the only power that actually matters. He set the deed down on the glass table. Outside, a black SUV moved through traffic below, one of his men, always watching, always protecting. She was found, Aleandro continued. My sister. Alive. And when I held her, I understood that I would spend the rest of my life making sure no one else lost what I almost lost. That is why. Sofia could not speak. The words had turned to glass in her throat. Emma's voice came from the hallway then, small and bright and alive. Mama? Mama Sofia? Are you awake? The girl ran in, 5 years old, wearing a pink pajama set, her dark hair tangled from sleep. She climbed into Sofia's lap like climbing into safety itself, and Sofia's arms closed around her without thinking, a reflex born from 8 months of protecting her in a shelter and 3 weeks of learning what it meant to be needed like this. Good morning, Piccola, Sofia whispered, and Emma nestled against her chest, her breathing slowing, settling. That was when Sofia understood that she was not just sitting in a penthouse. She was sitting in a home. That word had meant nothing to her for so long that it had become a ghost word, a thing people said that did not apply to her. Home. Here. This child. This man. This morning light. This deed in her hands. I have something for you, Aleandro said. He was standing by the kitchen counter, and he picked up a small wrap box, nothing fancy, just white paper and a single ribbon. When Sofia opened it, she found a journal inside. Leather-bound, expensive, the kind of thing she would have been afraid to touch 2 months ago. Inside the front cover, he had written in his careful handwriting, "For the story only you can tell." Sofia opened her mouth and closed it. Opened it again. I cannot write. You can now, Aleandro said. I have arranged for classes. 3 times a week, here in the penthouse. A tutor who works with adults. By next year, you will have your GED. By the year after, you will have whatever education you want. You are not nobody anymore, Sofia. And you never were. I need to show you something, Sofia said. The words came out shaky, uncertain. She set Emma down gently and stood up. Her hands moved to the bottom of her shirt, and she lifted it slowly, exposing her back to the morning light. The scars there were a map of hell, thin lines running in every direction, some raised and white with age, some still dark pink from the years of healing that was not quite finished. 8 years of abuse mapped across her skin like a history she could not erase. Aleandro did not flinch. He did not turn away. He stepped closer, and his finger traced one of the longest scars, gentle as a prayer, following the line from her shoulder blade down toward her spine. These do not define you, he said. His voice was rougher now, fractured. Your courage defines you. Everything you have survived, everything you have endured, everything you chose to do instead of surrendering, that is what defines you. Sofia turned to face him, and for the first time in 8 years, she let someone see all of her. Not just her scars. Her fear. Her doubt. Her hope, fragile as a candle in the wind. When Aleandro kissed her, it was not the dare from a bar or a game or a moment of foolishness. It was something earned, something real, something born from mutual rescue. She had saved his daughter, and he had saved her. In the hallway just outside the penthouse, Tony and Pietro stood frozen. They had been bringing the morning papers, a daily ritual they had performed for 15 years, but they stopped dead when they heard the sound of a kiss in the living room. Tony exchanged a look with Pietro, the kind of look that needed no words, because both men understood that something had fundamentally shifted in the universe they inhabited. In 15 years, Tony said quietly, I have never seen him like this. I know, Pietro replied. I was there for all of it. And I have never seen him like this. On the television in the corner, the news played without sound. Rachel Dawson's mugshot was on the screen, her expensive makeup smeared, her blonde hair falling around her face like a broken halo. The banner beneath it read, Wealthy philanthropist convicted in human trafficking ring. The federal courthouse steps showed Douglas Hale being led away in handcuffs, his face aged a decade in the 3 weeks since his arrest, his mouth moving without sound, probably begging, probably promising anything if someone would just let him go. But nobody was going to let him go. 40 years meant he would die in prison. 35 years meant Rachel Dawson would leave her cell only for a funeral, and even then only if the judge allowed it. The systematic destruction of their freedom was complete. Meanwhile, across the city, 8 women were being released from a state-safe house into the Los Angeles morning. They had been told they were nobody, that they belonged to the men who held them, that escape was impossible. That night, one woman had discovered that someone had been watching, someone had been working, someone had been building a case that would save them all. Sofia's voice had been the cornerstone of it all. 1 month after that morning in the penthouse, Sofia stood in front of a room full of women she did not know, holding a microphone that felt like a weapon made of light. She was in a community center in South Los Angeles, and the women in front of her had all survived what she had survived, trafficking, abuse, the slow death of hope. Some of them had scars visible on their skin. Some of them wore their scars inside where nobody could see them. I had $78, Sofia told them, her voice steady, no longer trembling. I had nowhere left to run. I had a debt of $85,000 that I could not pay. I had a man who wanted me dead, and I believed I deserved it. I believed I was nobody, that my life had no value, that the best I could hope for was a quiet death somewhere in the dark. She paused. Outside, rain began to fall, the kind of rain that came in November, cold and insistent. But I saved a child, Sofia continued. And by saving her, I learned that I was worth saving too. You are worth saving. Every single one of you. Your story matters. Your survival matters. Your voice matters. By the time Sofia finished speaking, she had cried and so had half the room, and the other half was holding hands with strangers who had become sisters in a single hour. She walked out into the November rain without an umbrella, and she did not mind that it soaked through her jacket. The rain felt like baptism, like becoming new. 6 months later, Sofia worked at a non-profit called the House of Hope, a place where trafficking survivors could come to learn skills, to testify, to rebuild their lives. She had her own office with her name on the door, Sofia Morales, survivor advocate. She had her own desk. She had a computer where she wrote recommendations for women who needed help. She had authority that was not given to her by anyone's fear, but earned by her own testimony and her own strength. On a cold February night, Sofia and Aleandro stood in the diner off Sunset Boulevard where it had all begun 3 weeks before the world changed. The same checkered floor. The same neon lights, humming their tired song. The same smell of stale coffee and grease, but now it smelled like memory instead of desperation. I had $78 and nowhere left to run, Sofia said. I was sitting in a cracked vinyl booth, and I could see the end of my story written in every shadow. And now? Aleandro asked. He was holding her hand across the table, his expensive watch catching the neon light. Now I have a home, Sofia said. Now I have a daughter who calls me Mama. Now I have your hand in mine, and I have the belief that I matter. Now I have a future. Emma came running through the diner door then, 6 years old now, older but still so small, still the child who had stumbled through the rain-soaked and bleeding. She threw her arms around Sofia's waist, and Sofia felt Aleandro's hand touch the back of her head, gentle, protective, permanent. The storm will pass and you are far stronger than you think, Aleandro said. The words he had spoken that first night, the promise that had saved her. Sofia smiled. I know. This story teaches us that even in the darkest moments, love finds a way. If you believe that, hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment and tell us how this story made you feel. Thank you for staying with us until the very end.